My wife faked cancer to get money from me and then spent it all on her affair partner. I need to get this off my chest because I don't even know how to process what just happened. I feel like my life is a movie right now, a bad one. And before anyone asks, no, this isn't some made-up story. I wish it was. Here's how it started. About 6 months ago, my wife Emma came to me in tears. I'll never forget it. She was sitting on the couch, holding this crumpled piece of paper in her hands, and she was shaking so badly I thought she was having a panic attack. When I sat down beside her, she handed me the paper. It was a diagnosis letter, ovarian cancer, stage 3. I don't even know how to describe what I felt in that moment. My wife, my Emma, was sick like that, sick. My mind was spinning. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there with her, holding her while she cried. The only thing I could think about was, what do we do now? How do I help her? What if I lose her? She told me she didn't want to tell anyone else yet, not her family, not her friends, because she wasn't ready for people to treat her differently. She said she wanted to fight this privately, just the two of us. At the time, that made sense to me. I mean, people deal with bad news in their own way, right? And if keeping it private was what she needed, I was going to respect that. But then things started happening really fast. Emma said her doctor recommended an aggressive treatment plan. She needed chemotherapy right away, and there was this specialist in another city who could oversee her treatment. The catch? It wasn't covered by insurance. She explained that the specialist was out of network, but he was supposed to be one of the best in the field. She didn't want to take any chances. She said, I just want to make sure I live. I need you to trust me on this. Of course I trusted her. I loved her. I didn't even hesitate. I told her, whatever it takes. Over the next few weeks, I started doing everything I could to help. I picked up extra shifts at work, sold my car, and started taking public transportation. I even dipped into the savings account we'd been building for years, the one we were supposed to use for a house someday. But the weird thing was Emma's behavior started to change. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of her diagnosis. But looking back now, I can't believe I didn't see the signs. She'd disappear for hours at a time, claiming she was at appointments or treatments. But she never wanted me to come with her. She said the chemo made her feel ugly and sick, and she didn't want me to see her like that. It broke my heart to think she felt that way, so I didn't push. I thought I was giving her space to deal with everything. Then there were the little inconsistencies. She'd come home from her supposed chemo sessions looking completely fine. No nausea, no fatigue, no hair loss. When I brought it up, she said she was lucky and wasn't having as many side effects as other patients. She joked that she must have been built differently. Again, I didn't question it because, well, what the hell did I know about chemotherapy? I wanted to believe her. But then last week, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was cleaning up around the house when I found the diagnosis letter again. It was under a pile of papers on her desk. I don't know why, but I picked it up and read it again. This time I noticed something I hadn't before. The hospital logo at the top of the letter looked off. It was pixelated, like it had been copied and pasted. Some of the wording didn't sound professional. There were typos in a medical diagnosis letter. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I just didn't understand how these things worked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I Googled the hospital's name and found their website. I compared the letterhead on their website to the one on the letter. They didn't match. At that point, I was sweating. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I called the hospital and asked to confirm an appointment with the doctor listed on the letter. The woman on the phone was polite but confused. She told me they didn't have a doctor by that name. In fact, they didn't even have an oncology department at that location. I hung up and just sat there. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like forever. My brain was racing. I kept thinking, this can't be real. There has to be some kind of explanation. But deep down, I knew. That night, I confronted Emma. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to know the truth. I showed her the letter and told her what I'd found out. She just stared at me for a long time, like she was trying to decide what to say. Then she did something I will never forget. She smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not an I've been caught smile. It was this cold, calculated smirk, like she was amused that I'd figured it out. She looked me right in the eye and said, "You weren't supposed to find that." That's all she said. No apology, no explanation, just that. I don't even know how to describe what I felt in that moment. Betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. This was my wife, the person I trusted more than anyone in the world. And she'd lied to me about having cancer. I gave up everything for her, and it was all a lie. I'll update you when I know more. For now, I just needed to tell someone, thanks for reading. Update. After that night when Emma smirked at me and said, You weren't supposed to find that. I couldn't sleep. I was too angry, too hurt, too confused. I needed answers. Why did she lie? What was she doing with all the money I gave her for treatments? And how could she sit there and look me in the eye like it was no big deal? The next morning, I decided to find out for myself. Now, I'll admit what I did next wasn't exactly ethical, but honestly, after what she pulled, I don't care. I logged into her email. I had the password from years ago when we booked flights together, and I guess she never bothered to change it. At first, I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, but then I stumbled across a folder labeled receipts. My heart sank when I opened it. There were fake invoices for chemotherapy sessions, medications, and even doctor consultations, all of them poorly made. The kind of thing you could whip up in Microsoft Word, if you had 20 spare minutes. But that wasn't the worst part. In another email thread, I found a conversation with someone named Ryan. The emails were explicit. I'm talking the kind of stuff you wish you could unsee. At first, I thought maybe she was just flirting with some random guy online. But as I kept scrolling, I realized this was way more serious. Ryan wasn't just some fling. He was her boyfriend. At this point, I was shaking. My brain felt like it was overheating. I couldn't believe what I was reading. But there was one thing I still didn't understand. What did Ryan have to do with the fake cancer? Then I found an email from Emma to Ryan with the subject line, "Our trip." The email included a receipt for a 5-star resort in Mexico, flights, accommodations, and even spa treatments, all paid for with my money. That's when it hit me. Emma had been using the money I gave her for treatments to bankroll her affair. I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was going to throw up. All those nights I stayed late at work, all those sacrifices I made, all the guilt I felt about not being able to do more for her. And she was spending my hard-earned money on this guy. I didn't stop there. I couldn't. I needed the full picture. Over the next few hours, I went through every email, every receipt, and every clue I could find. Here's what I pieced together. Emma and Ryan had been seeing each other for almost a year. The fake cancer story started about 6 months ago, right around the time Ryan lost his job. Emma had been transferring money from our joint account into a private account she'd set up in her name, which she was using to support Ryan. It wasn't just the Mexico trip. She'd paid his rent, bought him a new phone, and even covered his car payments. While I was working myself to the bone and worrying about how to save her life, she was out playing sugar mama to her affair partner. That night, I confronted her again. This time, I didn't give her a chance to smirk or brush me off. I laid it all out. The fake invoices, the emails, the transfers, and even the receipts for Ryan's car payments. At first, she tried to deny it. She said I was misunderstanding things. But when I showed her the emails, she just stopped. She sat there in silence for a few minutes, then said, "I didn't think you'd actually look into it." That's when I lost it. I yelled. I demanded to know why she would do something like this. Her response? "Because you're too nice. I knew you'd give me whatever I asked for." I can't even describe what it felt like to hear those words. It was like she reached into my chest and ripped my heart out. Here's the thing. Emma thought she was smarter than me. She thought she had everything under control. But what she didn't realize was that I'd been documenting everything, every fake invoice, every bank transfer, every email. After our argument, I started taking steps to protect myself. I contacted the bank to freeze our joint account. I called my lawyer to start the divorce process, and I started gathering evidence for what I knew was coming next. The final nail in the coffin came when I found a calendar event on her phone. It was a dinner reservation for 2 scheduled for this Friday with Ryan, the same Ryan she'd been funding with my money. The same Ryan she was willing to destroy our marriage for. I don't even know how to describe how I feel right now, but betrayal doesn't even begin to cover it. I gave this woman everything. I trusted her with my life, and she used me. She used me to fund her affair with some jobless loser who couldn't even pay his own rent. But you know what? She's not going to get away with it. I've got a plan, and I'm going to make sure she pays for what she did. I'll update you soon. Final update. Here's how I got my revenge. The first thing I did was get my finances in order. I wasn't about to let Emma take another dime from me. I went to the bank and froze our joint account. The banker didn't even question it when I showed him the evidence, copies of the fake invoices, the transfers to her personal account, and the receipts for Ryan's rent and car payments. Then I called my lawyer. Thankfully, I live in a state where adultery can play a role in divorce settlements. My lawyer was very interested in the evidence I'd gathered. He told me to document everything and not confront Emma again until we had a plan. Meanwhile, I started quietly separating myself from her. I changed the passwords on my email, my phone, and even my Netflix account. Small petty victories feel amazing when you're in a situation like this. I also moved into the guest room and told Emma I needed space to process everything. She seemed fine with it, probably because she thought she still had the upper hand. But she didn't. Once my finances were secure, I decided it was time for the world to know the truth. Emma had been hiding behind this fake cancer story for months, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. First, I called her parents. I've always been close to them, so this was one of the hardest calls I've ever had to make. But they deserved to know what their daughter had done. I explained everything, the fake diagnosis, the stolen money, the affair. At first, they didn't believe me until I emailed them the evidence. Her mom cried. Her dad swore he was done with her. Next, I contacted our close friends. Most of them were horrified. A few were skeptical at first. But once I shared the proof, they were furious. Emma had played the sympathy card with everyone, and now her house of cards was collapsing. The best part, one of those friends happened to work in HR at Emma's job. I didn't even have to ask. They forwarded my evidence to her boss. Emma got fired the next day. With Emma's reputation in shambles, I turned my attention to her affair partner, Ryan. I knew where he lived, thanks to the receipts Emma had so generously kept in her email, so I decided to pay him a little visit. Now, I didn't go there to start a fight. I'm not that kind of guy. But I did bring a folder full of receipts and emails proving that Emma had been funding his lifestyle with stolen money. When I showed up at his door, he looked confused. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm Emma's husband," I said, or at least I was. "You and I need to talk." Ryan tried to deny everything at first, but when I handed him the folder, his face went pale. He stammered out some excuse about how he didn't know where the money was coming from. I told him I didn't care. I just thought he should know that Emma's cut off. No more money, no more trips, no more rent. You're on your own. Then I left. By this point, I was ready to file for divorce. My lawyer had all the evidence he needed to make sure I came out on top. Emma tried to play the victim, of course. She even tried to convince me to go to couples counseling, saying we could work through this. I wasn't buying it. The day I served her the divorce papers, I also handed her an eviction notice. What Emma didn't know was that the house was in my name. I bought it before we got married, and I'd been the one paying the mortgage the entire time. Legally, she had no claim to it. She had 30 days to pack her things and leave. The look on her face when she realized she was losing everything. Priceless. Here's where things get even crazier. After Emma moved out, I got a message from someone I never expected to hear from. Ryan's wife. Yes, you read that right. Ryan was married too. His wife, Lily, found out about the affair around the same time I did. She told me Ryan had been lying to her for months, claiming he was working late when he was really out with Emma. She also told me Emma had been sending Ryan money directly into his personal account, money he then used to take both of them out on dates. Lily and I ended up meeting for coffee to compare notes. She was just as angry and hurt as I was, and honestly, it felt good to talk to someone who understood what I was going through. We decided to team up and make sure Emma and Ryan faced the consequences of their actions. Lily filed for divorce too. Last I heard, Ryan was living in a cheap motel, and Emma was couch surfing with friends who hadn't cut her off yet. If you enjoyed this Reddit story and want to hear more, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling content. Your support means a lot. Thank you for being part of this journey.